A recent retirement living standards in the UK report says that you now need £45,400 per year for a comfortable retirement. £62,700 if you're a couple. This is actually a report that came out of Loughborough University, which is where I went myself. So it was actually pretty cool to come across this and give it a read. I mean, 4 VKs for £5 in a student union 10 years ago. Those were honestly the days. But they are the numbers for a comfortable retirement, and apparently only 9% of people are on track for that. It does say that 82% of people of the working population are on track to reach the minimum standard of living in retirement. But I don't know about you, the minimum doesn't sound too enticing. So in this video, I'm going to tell you where you actually stand by age, looking at the data, how you can hopefully smash the average, even though I know averages aren't always that helpful. And most importantly, share what to do if you are behind or if you're ahead and want to get even further ahead. And the thing is, regardless of where you currently are, you can definitely do something positive. And if you are behind, the answer is not burying your head in the sand. If you need a hand as well, check the first 2 links in the description. That is exactly how I can help you out. First up, pensions. And just so we're clear, when we say pensions here, we mean your private pensions, workplace and personal pots, not the state pension. We'll bring that in later because it can do a lot of the heavy lifting. Here's the typical pot by age. And when we say typical, we're talking about the median, which is if we lined everyone up in each age category, the middle person. Not the mean, because the mean can get dragged massively up by a small number of people. For example, the Bet365 CEO who pays herself a nice tidy few £100 million a year, or maybe your rich uncle who also could be sat on an enormous pot, although probably not as much as good old Denise. But to put the numbers back on screen, this is ONS data. It's the 2020 to 2022 data set, so it is a couple of years old, but that's the latest official data there is. And to be honest, I don't think the numbers would be too different now, even though we are a few years on. Feel free to pause the video now and find your age range and have a look to see how you compare. Now, this is the point where some people will be slightly relieved and some people will maybe panicking a bit. I guess overall, the median numbers for each age bucket aren't too large, and we will go through a maths example of how much income this could give you in retirement and also what you can do to hopefully boost these numbers regardless of what bucket you're in. But a few other things that are worth flagging. The reason why the 75 plus age bracket has a smaller pot is because these people have likely started drawing down on that money. Although, of course, whether that pot and these numbers are big or small is all relative to you and your situation. That's what she said. Had to get that one in there. In total, though, 70% of adults do have some type of private pension based on this data, which I actually think is great. That is a very high percentage. And of course, even a small pension is better than no pension. And it shows really how positively impactful auto-enrollment was, which was introduced in 2012. And talking of auto-enrollment, this graph really helps as well to show its impact. That pension participation rates, so those actively paying in of eligible men and women in the private sector, jumped massively after it was introduced in 2012, and they're nearly up to 90% now by 2023. Unsurprisingly, the 16 to 24 age group has the lowest participation rates, and I imagine that's because most of them simply haven't entered the workforce yet. Not to mention that auto-enrollment doesn't officially start until age 22 as well. I would actually love for the auto-enrollment age to be lower and for pension contributions to be on all your earnings, not just your qualifying earnings, but that is a different point for a different day. But they are the ONS figures. Some brokers also publish their own figures. For example, these are AJ Bell's figures as at June 2026. These are from their own customers' books, so likely more skewed towards higher numbers, and we can see that in the figures. But back to the ONS data, and another thing to point out is that unfortunately, there is a real gap between men and women when it comes to pensions. This now is from the government's gender pensions gap, and once again, this is the most recent data from 2022. It shows that by your late 50s, men have around 156,000 in a pension, whereas women have around 81,000. That's roughly a 48% gap, which is obviously a massive difference. And this gap is unfortunately persistent across different types of pension schemes. Luckily, this isn't the case with ISAs, which is the perfect segue. So now talking of ISAs, here is the average by age once again. This data was the latest I could find. It's from April 2023, and it was taken from HMRC and has been pulled together in an AJ Bell article. This is the total ISA pot, though, to bear in mind, not just stocks and shares ISAs. And these numbers are unfortunately the mean. not the medium. So they're almost certainly being pulled up by some ISA millionaires in our country potentially. Cheers, Denise, and cheers to your rich uncle once again. But at the time of this data, in April 2023, there were around 5,000 ISA millionaires. And I think today now, in 2026, there's double that. Compared to the private pension numbers, these numbers are generally lower. Even though it is using the mean, they are still overall generally lower. And I guess that's expected because when it comes to pensions, people are generally more familiar, and plus the positive impact of auto-enrollment back in 2012. The AJ Bell article does say that ISA participation rates in general are quite low across all types of ISAs, and particularly when it comes to stocks and shares ISAs, although that ISA participation rate does rise with age, which once again is expected. But actually, saying all of that, this chart from the government website shows there are millions, 10 million people plus of us in the country that do use ISAs, which is great. And perhaps unexpectedly, most of that money flows into cash ISAs. If you look at the bottom row here in this chart, you can see cash ISA contributions massively beat stocks and shares ISA contributions in the most recent data. But saying that, the value of stocks and shares ISAs is more than the value of cash ISAs. And really, you can see here on this chart, that's been the case for most of the last 10 to 15 years, which of course shows the power of investing. Another bit of good news is on ISAs, the gender gap doesn't seem to exist as much. More women actually hold an ISA than men. It is close, and it has always been pretty close, as you can see. But in the most recent data, it was a 52-48 split. However, AJ Bell do say that men are more likely to invest using their ISAs compared to women, and men ISAs are worth more on average, around £35,500 versus £32,500. Pound Sense describe these gaps as a structural problem. Some of it does come back to starting the family, so often the woman will be out of work or maybe working part-time. But I did like these ideas in their article, which I'll flash up on screen, and you might be able to try and use them if you are affected. Some specific steps which you can try and take. The bigger issue with all of these ISA numbers, though, is that most of this money isn't invested. It's often just sitting in cash. I'll flash some more stats up on the screen. I don't know, there's been a lot of different sources, but yeah, these stats have also come from various sources as well. But for many people, I guess the key point here is it's not necessarily about starting because they probably have some sort of cash ISA. It's actually about taking the plunge and getting that money invested. Of course, having money sat in cash is fine if it's for an emergency fund or for a savings goal, but if it's sat there for the long term, then it's going to get eaten away by inflation. Okay, they are the numbers. So how does it impact your potential retirement? And once again, just a caveat, I do know these are all average numbers, mean, medium, so it can feel a little bit abstract. But I think if we actually work through an example, you can then try and apply this to your own situation and your own numbers. So going back to that Loughborough Uni article, every year they work out what a retirement actually costs. There's 3 levels when it comes to a standard of living: minimum, moderate, and comfortable. The minimum as a single retiree with no rent is just under £14,000, which is just a bit more than the current state pension. For a retired couple who are mortgage free and not in London, it would cost around £22,500. The report also goes through different expense categories in quite granular detail, as you can see. And to be clear, these are all after-tax spending figures. Social and cultural participation is the largest category, then food and transport-related costs. But one of the biggest catches that stood out to me reading through this is if you don't own your own home, you need a lot more saved for retirement in general, which makes sense. And I guess why being mortgage-free when it comes to retirement is so helpful. If you're in London, particularly, and you aren't mortgage free and you are renting, you will need to have a lot more saved. So if you are going to be renting in retirement, and more people will be, I guess the overarching message is you need more saved in retirement to cover your expenses, because renting will take up such a big part of those expenses. And I guess all of those things are just quite logical and probably common sense. Single people have lower expenses, as do those who are mortgage free and as do those who aren't based in London. So if you're in a couple, not mortgage free and based in London, you're probably going to be paying the highest amount in expenses when it comes to retirement. But I also think there's a lot of unseen variables that don't necessarily come up in the data when you look at these average type numbers. For example, are your parents dependent on you? That will almost certainly cost you time and money if they are. Do you have 0 kids or 5 kids? Once again, that will have a massive impact. Which part of the country do you live in? How long do you plan to work for? When you retire, will you have other income streams you can still tap into through, I don't know, a rental property? Will you get an inheritance at some point? You don't maybe need as much saved. What about your partner? What is their financial position like? And I guess that is the problem looking at these types of data points. It can be interesting, and I of course find it interesting, which is why I've made a whole video on it, but it also might not be that helpful. So I think you just want to take the specific things out of it and apply it to your situation, and that's what we'll be going through shortly. Saying all of this though, and before we do go through those specific actions, let's do a bit of quick maths. And I'm going to be using some of these numbers we've spoken about already. Let's say you're 60, so you're not a state pension age, but you have got the typical pot for this age bucket, which is 140k in a pension and 40k in an ISA. That is £180,000 in total. I actually got my good friend Claudinho to help me pull together this table that you can see on screen. It is very rough, I'll be honest, as the pension numbers are median based on the ONS data. They also take into account defined benefit wealth, and the ISA numbers are for all ISAs, and they are the mean based on separate data. I also haven't taken into account any taxes either, which on your pension, you may have to pay some tax on withdrawal. Of course, there is a load of caveats here, and you might be thinking this example is a bit pointless, but still, I thought it'd just be helpful to run through. So using those assumptions, we've got a 180k pot. We're now going to apply the 4% safe withdrawal rate, which says essentially how much you can hypothetically withdraw from your investments each year and not run out of money, which I also know can be a bit crude, but I do think it's easy and helps to picture things and work things out very simply. So 4% of 180k is £7,200 a year. If you're before state pension age, then with that amount, you simply cannot even reach the minimum standard of living level needed. Assuming you get to state pension and receive the full state pension, which is currently around £12,500, then you have just under £20,000 per year. And even if just you have that, you actually can nearly reach the minimum standard of living for a couple with no mortgage. But still, this, of course, doesn't get you anywhere near the levels needed for a moderate or comfortable standard of living in retirement, as they are in the 30 to 60k range based on this Loughborough study. The state pension is an interesting one. I think a lot of people will be able to have a retirement once they get to state pension age, as essentially at that point, it's a guaranteed income for life. Although the extent that they'll have a moderate or comfortable lifestyle really depends on their other pots, their ISA and their pension, and what other wealth they have, which will be on top of that state pension. I mean, for me personally, I'm nearly 40 years away from receiving the state pension, so I genuinely don't think it will work the same by the time I get there. And I guess an important point is, if you are younger, in your 20s, 30s, maybe even 40s, and you're watching this, then I feel like it's probably better if we almost plan for the worst and try to invest more and don't expect a state pension at all. And if we do get the full state pension, however it looks and works in the future, then it's just a bonus. That's just my thoughts anyway, though. Let me know what you make of that down in the comments below. An interesting point on the state pension as well is that it essentially works out to be an asset base of roughly £315,000, and that's because if you take that number and times it by the 4%, you then get to just over £12,500, which is roughly the current annual state pension. Most importantly, what can you actually do about it? And I do appreciate some of these suggestions might be a bit of faff and admin, but stick with me, as ultimately they could give you more money, which is great, and you could have a better standard of life when it comes to your retirement. On the pension side, first, actually go and look at it. It sounds obvious, but most people genuinely have no idea what they've got or where it is, and that is across all pension types. They have no idea whether they're entitled to the full state pension, which you can check on the government's website. I'll link that down below. If you have got gaps in your national insurance record, then it might be worth filling them in. If someone has a DB pension, they often don't know how much they're going to be entitled to and when. That is also definitely worth finding out. If you have a DC pension, a workplace pension most commonly, then whenever I sort of speak to people, they often have never logged in. So if that is you, that's probably one of the most impactful steps you could take today. Once you do log in, you may be able to pick a better fund for you or reduce your fees, which, particularly if you're younger, could put loads of money in your pocket when compounded over the decades. But it's worth doing that at any age and taking control of any workplace or private pensions that you have. And another thing that's worth doing at any age, nudging your contributions up. This might not be possible for everyone, and if not, that's completely fine. But even an extra % or two per month over the years can go a long way to putting more money in your pension pot. Probably an obvious one, but it's worth saying, take the full employer match. If your company will match more and you're not taking it, that is free money you're leaving on the table. Another one, track down your old pension pots. If you've moved jobs a few times, you've probably got pensions scattered about. Contact your old employer or use the government's pension tracing service, which I'll also link down below. Once you do track down those old pots, or if you know where your old pots are, then consolidating them can make your life much simpler. More than anything though, it means that you won't be adding to the 30 odd billion currently of lost pensions. That's the pension side. Now moving on to the ISA side. If you haven't got one, open one, and that is a stocks and shares ISA I'm talking about. Some platforms actually provide sign-up offers. When you do sign up, I'll link my page down below that links all of these offers as they do change from time to time. And if you've got one and your money's sitting in cash, in a cash ISA, then it's worth considering whether you should actually just invest that money instead, particularly if you don't need that cash for 5-10 years plus. I think the thing with stocks and shares ISAs is they are much more accessible than workplace pensions. So people tend to check them a lot more. When their pot isn't growing very fast and they're maybe not putting away as much as they might like to, it can genuinely get quite demotivating. I found that myself too. But honestly, just stick with it. Treat it as an extra expense or tax that you have to put away each month no matter what. And trust me, you'll be surprised after a few years at what your pot can grow to. I'd also say automate it if you can, if you're able to on the platform you're using. Wherever you can afford, just set up an auto invest and get the habit going of investing that amount automatically every month. I haven't mentioned lifetime ISAs yet, as whilst they have pros and cons, they're normally better used to save for your first home deposit, but a stocks and shares lifetime ISA can also be used to invest for the long term, for retirement, and I have one of those myself, as I also have a stocks and shares ISA, a SIPP, and a workplace pension. So you definitely can have multiple accounts and use them in the best way for your personal situation and circumstances. And finally on this one, and of course this isn't an investing video necessarily, I've got plenty of those that go into it in much more detail, but ultimately when it comes to actually choosing those investments, keep your fees low, use those tax wrappers, and keep your investments simple by using global index funds and ETFs. If you're watching this video and you've made it to this point, you probably already know that, but a lot of the countries still don't. So I think it is worth re-emphasizing. And I also think that's why it's so important to spread the word and get more people investing. So feel free to send this video to a mate or to your mum who finally needs to start investing. There's also quite a lot to unpick across all of these various data sources. I didn't want to make a 2-hour long film, so I tried to cover the most important things, the most important numbers, but I will link all of the sources down below if you want to go through them for yourself in detail. If you did look at those tables earlier and felt a little bit uneasy, try not to stress too much, because there are positive actions that you can take to improve your position. I think particularly if you do still have many years left, invest what you can, be consistent, and honestly the power of time and compound interest will go a long way to helping you improve your financial position. In particular, I get quite a lot of messages from people in their 40s who think that they're starting late. You're genuinely not. You still have decades ahead of you, which is a lot of time for compound interest to work some magic, and you're probably in or near your peak earning years. You might be able to contribute quite a lot per month in your various pots, so you might be able to actually build up those pots relatively quickly once you start focusing on them. And whatever age you are, please don't sit there comparing yourself to anyone else, especially not a 24-year-old on TikTok with a Lambo. Everyone that comes from different backgrounds and different positions. And the only thing that really matters is that you are doing what you can do for yourself and your partner and your family, and that you're heading in the right direction. And I hope this video has helped out a little bit with that. If you do need a hand of investing, check the first 2 links in the description. The top one will be my free investing guide, cheat sheet, and course, which can hopefully help you get started. And I'll put another video up on screen next if you want to watch a recent portfolio update that I made, where I go through my whole portfolio, exactly what I invest into, exactly what platforms I use and why. So I'll link that video on screen. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.